Madam Deputy Speaker, as I said, if honourable members opposite managed to hold their noses last September to vote with the Prime Minister and the Chancellor, it is truly astonishing they still feel able to do so now after all that has happened. Energy bills have been rising fast and they are set to rise by more than £600 in April. Inflation is at its highest rate in decades and is now set to rocket to 8% next month. And what's more, the government's arguments that they need this money for social care have been left in tatters. Not only have they failed to produce a plan to fix social care, but we know that ministers looked the other way as billions of pounds of public money were handed out to fraudsters and written off. They ignored the warnings on fraud, they were careless with waste, and they are now expecting working people to foot the bill for their mistakes. And if that wasn't bad enough, it is now clear that private sector workers will be asked to pay twice. As our new analysis shows, private sector workers will face a double whammy, as almost all of the rise in their employers' contributions is set to be passed on to workers through lower wages too. Madam Deputy Speaker, ministers, and indeed some of their backbenchers, often try to pretend the cost of living crisis is entirely the result of global factors. But that argument simply does not hold true. Most damagingly, it ignores the fact the government could and should be doing far more to help people make ends meet. The truth is that decisions made by this government over many years have left us uniquely exposed to rising gas prices. From cutting gas storage to leaving our homes poorly insulated and failing to invest in renewables and nuclear, this government's approach means that rising energy costs hit people in the UK much harder than they should. The truth is, too, that the government has failed to step up and offer people the help they need with energy bills now. Labour's plan is to give everyone £200 and those in greatest need £600 to help meet energy costs. This would be funded with a one-off windfall tax on North Sea oil and gas producers' profits. The alternative from the Chancellor is to land everyone with a buy now, pay later loan and to announce a council tax rebate that some of those in the greatest need will never even see. And the truth is, when it comes to the tax rise that we are debating today, an unfair tax rise on working people, a tax rise of £500 for the average family, a tax rise on businesses and jobs, the responsibility begins and ends here. Conservative MPs voted 6 months ago for that tax rise. The Minister admitted to me last week the government recognised the impact the tax rise will have on working people. Well, today they have a chance to change course. Madam Deputy Speaker, today we are asking all members to join us in asking the government to think again. When the government first introduced this tax rise on working people and their jobs, it was blindingly unfair. Far from asking those with the broadest shoulders to contribute more, the Tories showed their true colours and went straight for a tax rise on 27 million working people. Since then, the case against this tax rise has got stronger and stronger. With energy bills rising and about to soar, and inflation set to hit 8%, the struggle for millions of people to make ends meet is getting harder by the day. Now is the time to change course and help people face the tough months ahead. Now is the time to send a message to the Chancellor ahead of his budget on March the 23rd. Now is finally the time to do the right thing and cancel this unfair tax rise.
Minister Lucy Fraser.
Madam Deputy Speaker, it's a privilege to close this debate on behalf of the government. And I'd like to begin by echoing the words of my right honourable friend, the Chief Secretary, about the situation in Ukraine. Our thoughts are, of course, with the men and women and the children struggling to comprehend and respond to the day-to-day realities of the Russian invasion. Madam Deputy Speaker, turning to the specifics of the debate motion and the health and social care levy, we must and we will press ahead. In fact, as the Honourable Member for Ealing South recognised, legislation has already been debated and indeed enacted. Introducing the levy has been a tough, but it has been a responsible choice, which is what, Madam Deputy Speaker, good government is all about. The Honourable Member for Broadlands said these are good proposals and we need to spend the money on the health and social care. The levy is a means to tackle a number of crucial ends, tackling the backlog in our National Health Service and aiding its recovery from the challenges of COVID, while finally enacting long-term reform to social care, an issue that too many governments have ducked for too long. As my honourable friend from South Cambridgeshire said, this has simply, by other governments, been put on the too difficult to do pile, as he recognised it needs a serious, sustained amount of funding. A record £13 billion a year on average will now be invested into the NHS and social care by way of a new UK-wide 1.25% ring-fence levy based on national insurance contributions and an equivalent increase in dividend tax rates. Madam Deputy Speaker, many members are on the benches opposite, the members for Merthyr Tydfil, Ellesmere Port, Neston, Abbott...
Order. It is getting very noisy again. Please respect the Minister who is winding up, and let's listen to what she has to say. Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I thank you, and I was just highlighting the number of speakers opposite. Eastington, the Honourable Member for Liverpool Riverside, who are challenging this government, as others have challenged it, on its approach to the cost of living. But the plain truth is, Madam Deputy Speaker, that we recognise the pressure that people face. And we have done what we can to ease that pressure, and we will continue to explore other measures. And frankly, our actions speak for themselves. During the course of the pandemic, we provided over £400 billion of direct support to the economy, protecting millions of jobs and livelihoods. The Honourable Member for Coonan Valley said we should invest more, but we're spending over £600 billion on gross public sector investment over the course of this Parliament. The Honourable Member, the Right Honourable Member for Leeds West, said we should have acted on the cost of living in September. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, we did. The government is providing support worth over £20 billion across this financial year and next that will help families with the cost of living. And not just in September did we provide that funding, Madam Deputy Speaker. We have consistently tried to support those on the lowest incomes. Because, as the Honourable Member for Vauxhall mentioned, it is important that we support those who need it most. And since 2010, Conservative governments have kept lower paid people out of tax. The income tax personal allowance threshold has increased by over 90%, meaning a typical basis rate taxpayer now pays £1,200 less per year than they would have done without our changes. A number of members have talked about whether this is a progressive system that we are introducing, and the Honourable Member for Luton South and the Honourable Member for Coonan challenged that it was. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, it obviously is when 14% of taxpayers are paying 50% of the tax. It obviously is when the highest 2% of taxpayers are paying 20% of the tax. Not only that, but the levy will ensure that those on the lowest income get the most support. In our reformed system, total social care spend on the least wealthy 20% of older adults will be £4.24 billion in 2021 to 22 in a steady state, compared to £0.51 billion on the wealthiest 20% of older adults. This shows that the lowest wealth quintile continue to receive the most state support. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Honourable Member for Salford and Eccles and the Honourable Member for Luton South all said we should cancel this tax because it was unfair, and both of them quoted the IFS. Madam Deputy Speaker, when we introduced this levy, Paul Johnson, the Director of the IFS, said this was an overall much-needed reform to social care, and unavoidable pressures on the NHS are being funded for a broad-based and broadly progressive tax rise. I'd now like to turn, Madam Deputy Speaker, to the very important topic of fiscal responsibility. As my honourable friend for South Cambridgeshire said, and my honourable friend from Broadlands commented, if we don't bring in this tax rise, the alternative is more borrowing. And we cannot, and we should not, abdicate our fiscal responsibilities. As the honourable member for North Norfolk said, we've spent £400 billion during the course of COVID. We are in debt and we need to be honest about the situation. Our level of debt means we are vulnerable to shocks, including changes in interest rates and inflation. The public finances are stronger as a result of our early, bold action to support the economy during the pandemic, and because we didn't shy away from tough choices. Looking ahead, our new fiscal rules demonstrate fiscal responsibility and will keep the public finances on track in the years to come. The honourable member for Gordon and Aberdeen North talked about young people, but if we don't bring in these taxes, we'll be paying for everyday spending.
Order. I think the Minister is not going to be that much longer, so if we could just keep the noise down and hear what she has to say. Please. Minister.
So the honourable member for Gordon and the honourable member for Aberdeen North talked about young people. But if we don't bring in this taxation, what we will have is future generations left paying bills in our stead. Madam Deputy Speaker, in conclusion, this has been an important and constructive debate concerning issues which matter deeply and on which we as a government will not compromise. Being in government is about making the best possible decisions on behalf of the British people, and the Health and Social Care Levy is emblematic of that responsibility. The right policy at the right time for the right reasons.
The question is, as on the order paper. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order. Order. The sitting is suspended. The division bells will ring 2 minutes before we resume informally to hear President Zelensky's address. Order.
Order! Order. Just to say, we've just had a message from Ukraine. We will be a couple of minutes late before we start, just to let the House know. It's channel 3 for the headphones, just to help for those people who's been playing with it. They were set to the right. But there we are. Order, order. We are now meeting informally. As I informed the House earlier, given the exceptional and grave situation, I have agreed to a request from President Zelensky of the Ukraine to address members of this House about the situation in his country. That is why I have suspended the formal business of the House in order to hear the President's address. We have also been joined by the Ukraine Ambassador. President Zelensky, we have watched the situation unfold in your country with increasing concern, but also with increasing admiration for the courage, the fortitude displayed by you and your fellow Ukrainians. Mr. President, you are welcome to address members of the House of Commons and the Lords. You now have the floor. President.
Пане спікер, пане прем'єр-міністре, члени уряду, парламенту, лорди, леді та джентльмени. Я звертаюся до усіх людей Сполученого Королівства, до усіх людей Великої Британії, великого народу з великою історією. Я звертаюся до вас як громадянин, як президент, але теж великої країни. З великою мрією і великою боротьбою. Я хочу розказати вам про наші 13 днів. 13 днів війни, міцної війни, яку ми не розпочинали і не хотіли, але ведемо. Тому що не хочемо втратити те, що в нас є, те, що наше. Україну, так само, як ви не хотіли втратити свій острів, коли нацисти готувалися розпочати битву за вашу велику державу, битву за Британію. 13 днів нашого захисту. У перший день, о 4-й ранку, на нас полетіли крилаті ракети. Так, що всі прокинулись. Ми, діти, всі ми, живі люди, вся Україна. І відтоді не спить. Ми всі стали до зброї, ставши великою армією. На другий день відбивалась від атак у повітрі, на суші, на морі. І наші героїчні прикордонники на острові Зміїний у Чорному морі розповіли всім про фінал війни. А саме, куди зрештою відправиться ворог. Коли російський корабль вимагав від наших хлопців скласти зброю, вони відповіли йому так міцно, як не можна казати в парламенті. І ми відчули силу, велику силу нашого народу, який до кінця гнатиме окупанта. На третій день російські війська, не ховаючись, били просто по людям, по житловим будинках, артилерією, авіабомбами. І це остаточно показало нам, показало світу, хто є хто великі люди, а хто просто звірі. На четвертий, коли полонених ми вже почали брати десятками, ми не втратили гідність і не знущались над ними. Ми ставимось до них як до людей, бо ми лишились людьми на 4-й день цієї ганебної війни. На 5-й день терор проти нас вже був відвертим. Проти міст, проти маленьких містечок, зруйновані райони, бомби. Бомби, бомби знов, бомби на будинки, на школи, на лікарні. І це геноцид, який не зламав нас, мобілізував нас, кожного з нас і кожну. І дав нам відчуття великої правди. На 6-й день російські ракети упали на Бабин Яр. Це місце, де нацисти стратили 100 тисяч людей у роки Другої світової війни. Через 80 років по тому Росія вбила їх вдруге. На 7-й день ми зрозуміли, що вони руйнують навіть церкви бомбами, знов ракетами. Вони не знають святого і великого, як знаємо ми. На 8-й день світ побачив, що з російських танків стріляють по атомній електростанції, найбільшій в Європі. І світ почав розуміти, що це терор проти всіх. Це великий терор. На 9-й ми слухали зустріч країн НАТО. І без бажаного для нас результату, без мужності. Так, ми відчули це. Я не хочу нікого образити. Ми це відчули, що альянси не діють. Навіть небо закрити не можуть. І тому гарантії безпеки в Європі треба будувати з нуля. На 10-й день беззбройні українці в окупованих містах протестували повсюдно, масово. Зупиняючи бронетехніку голіруч, ми стали незламними. На 11-й день, коли бомбили вже житлові райони, коли від вибухів усе руйнувалось, коли евакуювали дітей з пошкодженої онколікарні, дитячої онколікарні, ми усвідомили, українці стали героями. Сотні тисяч людей, цілі міста, діти, дорослі, всі. На 12-й, коли втрати російської армії вже перевищили 10 тисяч вбитих, в цьому рахунку з'явився і генерал. І це дало нам впевненість, за усі злочини, за усі ганебні накази буде, все ж таки буде відповідальність Міжнародного суду або української зброї. На 13-й день у блокованому російськими військами Маріуполі померла дитина від зневоднення. Від зневоднення. Вони не пускають ні харчові продукти, ні воду, не дають людям. Просто заблокували. І вони в підвалах. Я думаю, всі чують. Там у людей немає води. За 13 днів російського вторгнення було вбито 50 дітей. 50 великих мучеників. Це страшно. Пустота. Замість 50 всесвітів, які могли би жити. А вони їх зібрали. Просто забрали. Велика Британія. Україна не прагнула цього. Не шукала величі, але стала великою. За ці дні цієї війни. країни, яка рятує людей попри терор окупантів, яка захищає свободу попри удари однієї з найбільших армій світу, яка обороняється попри відкрите небо, все ще відкрите, все ще для російських ракет, літаків, гвинтокрилів. Бути чи не бути? Ви добре знаєте, це шекспірівське питання. 13 днів тому це питання ще могло прозвучати про Україну. Але зараз вже ні. Очевидно, що бути. Очевидно, що бути вільними. І де, як не тут, нагадати вам слова, які Великобританія вже чула і які знову актуальні. Ми не здамося і не програємо. Ми підемо до кінця, ми будемо боротися на морях, будемо битися в повітрі, ми будемо захищати нашу землю, якою не була ціна. Ми будемо битися в лісах, полях, на узбережжях, у містах і селах, на вулицях, ми будемо битися на пагорбах Я хочу від себе додати, ми будемо битися всюди, на териконах, на березі Кальміуса і Дніпра, і ми не здамося. Звичайно, з вашою допомогою, з допомогою цивілізації великих країн, з підтримкою вашою, за яку ми вдячні і на яку ми дуже розраховуємо. І я окремо тобі вдячний, Борисе, мій друже. Посилюйте санкції проти держави-терориста. Визнайте її, нарешті, державою-терористом. Знайдіть спосіб зробити безпечним наше українське небо. Зробіть те, що ви можете. Те, що ви повинні. До чого зобов'язує велич вашої держави і вашого народу. Слава великій Україні! Слава Великій Британії! Дякую.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the House of Commons, I want to thank you for speaking to us and for giving us very clearly and powerful perspective of the tragic situation facing you and fellow Ukrainians. We have debated the situation in Ukraine numerous times in recent weeks, and I know that we will continue to do so, and that when we do so, your words will be resonating with us. I want to express the solidarity of the House of Commons with you, your compatriots, and we salute the courage of the people of Ukraine. Thank you, and our prayers are with you.
Order, Mr. Speaker.
Just let me say. We will now resume with the formal sittings of the House. Order, order. I will take the points of order from the leaders of the main parties before we return to the opposition day. I call the Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A point of order, with your permission, Mr. Speaker. May I say that never before in all our centuries of our parliamentary democracy has the House listened to such an address. In a great European capital, now within range of Russian guns, President Volodymyr Zelensky is standing firm for democracy and for freedom. In his righteous defense, I believe he has moved the hearts of everybody in this House. At this moment, ordinary Ukrainians are defending their homes and their families against a brutal assault. And they are, by their actions, inspiring millions by their courage and their devotion. And I think today, one of the proudest boasts in the free world is "Ya Ukrainets." I am a Ukrainian. So this is a moment for us to put our political differences aside, Mr. Speaker, and I know I speak for the whole House when I say that Britain and our allies are determined to press on with supplying our Ukrainian friends with the weapons they need to defend their homeland as they deserve. To press on with tightening the economic vice around Vladimir Putin, and we will stop importing Russian oil, Mr. Speaker, and my right honourable friend, the Business Secretary, will update the House on that tomorrow. And we will employ every method that we can, diplomatic, humanitarian and economic, Mr. Speaker, until Vladimir Putin has failed in this disastrous venture and Ukraine is free once more.
On a point of order, Mr. Speaker, every one of us has been moved by the bravery, the resolve and the leadership of President Zelensky. Invading troops marched through his streets, shells rained down on his people, and assassins seek his life. No one would have blamed him for fleeing, but instead he has stayed in Kyiv to lead the Ukrainian people and to fight. He's reminded us that our freedom and our democracy are invaluable. He's prompted the world into action where too often we've let Putin have his way. He's inspired the Ukrainian people to resist and frustrated the Russian war machine. He has shown his strength, and we must show him and the Ukrainian people our commitment and our support. Labour stands for the unity at home and abroad that will isolate the Putin regime. Labour stands for the toughest sanctions that will cripple the Russian state. Labour stands for providing Ukraine with the arms it needs to fight off their invaders. Labour stands with President Zelensky, with Ukraine, with democracy. Slava Ukraini. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Leader of the SNP, Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With your forbearance, if I can make a point of order. President Zelensky, we salute you. We stand with the people of Ukraine on the basis of the act of aggression, on the act of war of Putin. We must do all that we can to send support to Ukraine, to send the weapons that they need to defend themselves, to make sure that we sanction the regime in Moscow, that we deliver the clearest message to President Putin, that this will end in failure for him, that he will face justice at the International Court. We must stand in this House, throughout these islands, throughout the Western world, in defence of democracy, in defence of sovereignty. Peace, justice and the sovereignty of Ukraine must prevail. Let's make sure that we stand with our friends. We stand against those that have been bombed. We make sure that those that need our support, that need our sanctuary, will find a welcoming hand in these islands. Mr. President, we thank you. We salute you. Slavia Ukraine.
David.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. Hearing the words of President Zelensky should embolden us all. They serve as a reminder of all that we stand for, of all which so many Ukrainians are so bravely fighting for, a bravery exemplified by President Zelensky himself. That we should never take for granted our values of democracy, of freedom, and of our security. And though we in this House may disagree on many things, we stand together for those values, and together we stand together with the Ukrainian people. Mr. Speaker, it is right that we strengthen our support for Ukraine with military aid, with toughest of sanctions. And it's in that support that we should also recognise the people of Ukraine and indeed President Zelensky. I'm sure the whole House would agree that President Zelensky should be granted one of our nation's highest honours, an honorary knighthood. And I look forward to the day when we welcome back to this House President Zelensky in person.
Sir Geoffrey Donaldson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On a point of order, we commend President Zelensky and the people of Ukraine, and we stand with them in this their time of strife. But our response will not be judged by the volume or strength of our applause for President Zelensky. It will be judged by the volume and strength of our response to his request for help, for practical military support, and for humanitarian assistance for the people of Ukraine. We pray for their success. We dare not let them down.
Can I also like to thank the staff and the contractors for making this happen? And when you leave the chamber, can you please hand in your headsets on the way out? Where you got them from? I will now let the chamber clear. Thank you, everybody.